You can be turning to John 12. A little programming note, I guess. I think what I'm going to do is take a break from John for a while until we get closer to Easter. And then I'm going to come back to where I kind of left off. It also gives me an opportunity to start test flying some of the material I want that I want to use for the young marrieds class, Sunday school class. And you seem to be all young-looking people. You're my guinea pigs of sorts. John chapter 12, and just a couple of thoughts out of the gate. John, as I've mentioned on a number of occasions, doesn't really like chronology. So if you would try to match this up in a harmony of the Gospels or one of those others, some of that gets juxtaposed, I guess you'd say, a little bit. But that doesn't bother me because I'm going to just be interested in the first 8 verses or so. And really, my interest tonight is to talk a little bit about worship and its proximity to your life. And so just so you are aware of that, and recognizing also that the time frame here is you're getting very close to the last week of Jesus's life, and I find that particularly poignant. But I came across this from a mentor of mine, and I think you'll see how it fits once I read a few pages here. But one of the saddest experiences, this is Donald Whitney, of my childhood happened on my 10th birthday. Invitations to the celebration were mailed in advance to 8 friends. It was going to be my best birthday ever. They all came to my house right after school. We played football and basketball outside until dark. My dad grilled hot dogs and hamburgers while my mother put the finishing touches on the birthday cake. After we had eaten all the icing and ice cream and most of the cake, it was time for the presents. Honestly, I can't even recall one of the gifts today, but I do remember the great time I was having with the guys who gave them to me. Since I had no brothers, the best part of the whole event was just being with the other boys. The climax of this celebration was a gift from me to them. Nothing was too good for my friends. Cost was immaterial. I was going to pay their way to the most exciting event in town, the high school basketball game. I can still see us spilling out of my parents' station wagon, so you get an idea how old this guy is. My age or more. On a cool evening and running up to the gymnasium, standing at the window, paying the 9 25-cent tickets, and surrounded by my friends. It was one of those simple but golden moments in my life. The picture in my mind was a perfect ending to a 10-year-old boy's perfect birthday. 4 friends on one side and 4 friends on the other. I would sit in the middle while we munched popcorn, punched each other, which sounds about right, and cheered our high school heroes. As we went inside, I remember feeling happier than Jimmy Stewart. Again, you'd have to appreciate the timing here. Happier than Jimmy Stewart in the closing scene of It's a Wonderful Life. Then the golden moment was shattered. Once in the gym, all of my friends scattered, and I never saw them again the rest of the night. There were no thanks for the fun, the food, or the tickets, not even a happy birthday, but I'm going to sit with somebody else. Without a word of gratitude or goodbye, they all left without looking back. So I spent the rest of my 10th birthday in the bleachers by myself, growing old alone. As I recall, it was a miserable ball game. I tell that story not to gain sympathy for painful childhood memories, but because this is what caught my attention. Because it reminds me of the way we often treat God in worship. Though we come to an event where he is the guest of honor, it is possible to give him a routine gift, sing a few customary songs to him, and then totally neglect him while we focus on others and enjoy the performance of those in front of us. Like my 10-year-old friends, we may leave without any twinge of conscience, without any awareness of our insensitivity, convinced we have fulfilled an obligation well. John chapter 12, if you would. Jesus, therefore, 6 days before the Passover, came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So they made him a supper, and Martha was serving, but Lazarus was one of those reclining at the table with him. Mary then took a pound of very costly perfume of pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of the disciples who was attending to betray him, said, "Why was not this perfume sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor people," or to the poor? Now, he said this, verse 6, not because he was concerned about the poor, but because he was a thief and he had the money box. He used to pilfer what was put in it. Therefore, Jesus said, "Let her alone, so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. For you will always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." I want to suggest that there's several things here, and I won't take a lot of your time. But this caught my attention because there are several things here that speak to worship, and they speak to us as the kind of people we want to become. And so my question tonight, what makes Mary so special here? Before that, though, I want you to just notice a couple of things. They are having this celebration in the midst of a growing antagonistic, pretty proactive reach to capture Jesus, to arrest Jesus. And as you notice in the text, Lazarus now has, because of this whole situation, become, in a sense, as wanted as Jesus was. You will find that out if you look a little further in the text. I'm not going to do a lot of it. A large crowd of the Jews, verse 9, then learned that he was there, and they came not for Jesus' sake only, but that they might see Lazarus, whom he raised from the dead. But the chief priests planned to put Lazarus to death also, because on account of him, many of the Jews were going away and believing in Jesus. And so this whole situation now has come to a head, and the Sanhedrin and the real movers and the shakers here have realized that this is going to get out of hand if we don't do something quickly. And obviously we'll see what happens. But the other interesting thing is that they have this celebration anyway. And it really is a celebration of the power and the testimony of what God has done, raising Lazarus from the dead. And it suggests, I think, a certain boldness to celebrate this anyway in what has become an openly hostile environment. That's the first thing I find interesting. But what is it that made Mary special? Well, first of all, and I really have just three little thoughts here with regard to that. One of them was her love for Jesus, first of all, was bound up in an understanding of the reality and necessity of Christ's death, apart from all the others who apparently didn't get it. Now, I don't know if this is a male-female thing. All I know, if you look back, by the way, and I've got a note in there for you, Mark chapter 10. And you and I all know people who just don't seem to get it, right? You all know people who just don't get it, right? Well, Mark chapter 10, the latter part of, verse 33, he began saying, verse 33, "Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death, hand him over to the Gentiles, and they will mock him and spit on him and scourge him and kill him. And 3 days later, he will rise again." And the next comment out of the disciples' mouth is, "Wow, how should we prepare for that?" No, that's not the next word out of their mouth. The next one out of their mouth is, teacher, we want you to do something for us. It went right over their heads. Okay? And so when you go back to John chapter 12, you begin to understand that here is a person who understands the outcome of the situation. All right? She had found the answer, and this is somewhat metaphoric, but she had found the answer at the feet of Jesus. Whether it was the supper or that had preceded, where Martha and Mary, that whole interaction, where Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus. She's learning and growing and gaining insight. Those who know the most of Jesus spend the most time at his feet. Now, in our day, that task obviously has a little different, understanding. But the idiom here, the Hebrew idiom, is to sit at one's feet, is to learn about the person. And so, what I admire in Mary, what I think made Mary so special, is that her love for Jesus was bound up in an understanding of what was unfolding in his life. I don't know how much Calvin Coolidge said that was worth anything, but he did say this: it's only when men begin to worship that they begin to grow. Not bad for a politician. It's only when men begin to worship that they begin to grow. Secondly, her love for Jesus. And, have you heard the expression, and the children shall lead them? You've heard that, right? Sometimes it's the women that shall lead them. And I don't, and that's not meant to usurp any kind of headship or anything. No, don't go there. I'm just suggesting that sometimes, as a guy, I sit back and I marvel at the spirituality that my wife has that I seem to lose or misplace, if I can put it that way. All right. Secondly, her love for Jesus was bound up in her extravagant love for Jesus. Now, I have a little note here from, I forget who actually was the author. You don't have this quote in front of you, so just let me read it. A man named Geikie, not Geico. No, not Geico. Yeah. It was common to anoint the head of the rabbis who attended marriage feasts with fragrant oil, and special guests were sometimes similarly honored. Jesus himself, at an earlier date, had even his feet anointed by a grateful penitent who had besides washed them in her tears and wiped them with her hair, flowing loose in self-forgetfulness. But now Mary outdid all former honor paid him. The costliest anointing oil of antiquity was the pure spikenard drawn from the Indian plant and exposed in flasks of alabaster for sale through the Roman Empire, where it fetched a price that would put it beyond any but the wealthy. Interesting. Of this, Mary had brought a flask containing about 12 ounces weight, and now coming behind the guests as they reclined, opened the seal and poured out some of the perfume, first on the head and then on the feet of Jesus, drying them presently with the hair of her head like the predecessor, or like her predecessor. Now, I kind of did a little research, not a lot, but how long had she been holding on to this perfume? It's at least suggested that she had been holding on to it for a long time, maybe waiting for the right moment, just to show him how much she loved him. How much she understood his sorrow, how much she identified with that sorrow. And I think this, became kind of a tangible expression to that. And so the question really comes as we think about how we approach God and how we approach Christ. And I think I wrote it in your notes here. Are we bountiful in our love for Jesus Christ? The interesting thing here is, if you notice in verse 7, let her alone. He understood and he approved. You know, the other thing is here, how did this fragrance spread throughout the home? Because apparently it radiated. And, you know, I have to kind of wonder here. We often give Martha the better grade for her ability to serve and handle those kinds of things. But I've never found anything that suggested that Mary was unwilling to serve or to be around and doing things in the home, only that her focus at a specific time was on the Savior. So I wonder, as she moved around that home, that fragrance didn't kind of follow everybody around. But the extravagance of it. Now, this is not about being a poor steward. But there are times, and I have been privileged to know over the years, people who are extravagant in their giving. And, you know, it blessed, in our case at the pregnancy center, just men and women who owned companies and more than that, individuals often, in the absence of their church's support, would give vast amounts to the work, being extravagant in their giving. And, you know, I step back from this, and her love for Jesus was wrapped up in an understanding of what was happening to him and what that meant. She has saved this for her burial. She understands the nature of his death and his resurrection. And secondly, there is an extravagance here that I think is worth remembering. Thirdly, and we gotta stop. Her love for Jesus was bound up in what I'll call a lasting memorial for that. You don't find that here, but you do find a comment in Mark chapter 14. You want to just jump over there for a second. Hopefully I have the right passage. This is one of those that I didn't take the time to double check, so this could end poorly. But I think it's going to end all right. 14:9. Actually, let's back up to 6. Jesus said, "Let her alone. Why do you bother her? She has done a good deed to me, for you will always have the poor with you, and whenever you wished, you can do good to them. But you do not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for the burial. True," and this is the verse that I really wanted you to grab hold of. "Truly, I say to you, wherever the gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be spoken of in memory of her." There's a perpetual positive testimony. Now, I mentioned here some of the other reactions. Those that are present, Mark 14:4, were indignant. Matthew says that it was the disciples who were indignant, Matthew 26. And Judas, as you read in John 12, the spokesman for all the disciples, said it was better served by cashing it in and giving it to the poor. But Jesus accepted it. And Mark's gospel tells us that it has it has a perpetual memory attached to it. So I guess the question becomes, you know, what do we want to be known for? What do we want to be known for? I left you kind of 3 applications tonight. It's all built around bulking up. which is what I hear constantly from my own doctor and everybody else. You need to bulk up. Well, bulking up means sorting out the right facts. So the question I have, is there study in your life? Mary had made a study of the person of Jesus Christ, and I think it impacted the way she worshiped. Number 2, bulking up means training with the right motivation. Is there a discipline of worship in your life? Or is it more like Don Whitney's trip to the basketball game? Number 3, bulking up means seeing the bigger picture. Why am I doing this? Am I looking for gratification, or am I interested in giving myself away? Hopefully, I think I'm preaching to the choir here, but I find Mary's model helpful.